You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston, your home for uncensored news and underground music since 2011. All right. Welcome to another episode of Live Free, Think Free here on 90.1 KPFT Houston. We've been broadcasting, as you just heard, since 2011. Bringing you uncensored news, underground music, interviews, all kinds of cool stuff. That song you just heard is a new intro we're working on from a regular musician and part-time guest, Jeremy Carswell, Dance All Night. And we'll have some new music coming tonight as well from other local Houston band, and maybe even play some stuff we haven't played in a while, as well as an interview coming up with Professor Mattias Desmet. Some of you have heard his work over the last few months on mass formation, sometimes called mass hypnosis, mass formation, psychosis. We'll talk about all that. But what's going on, Micah? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I am excited to be on another episode, excited to be broadcasting on KPFT. I think that's a very important aspect of our show. And given all the changes and the exciting things happening at the station, I'd like to take a moment to talk about that. We're moving into a new home. It's much like the old home. It's an old house. So we're keeping something historic in Houston alive. I think that's exciting in its own right. It's going to be piped in with the best electronic technology, though. We're going to have cameras in the studio. So when we have musical guests, as we've been known to have for over a decade on our show, Derrick, that'll be exciting. We can bring different visual elements to it. We've been doing this for a while in our live stream, and those that are joining via live stream, I appreciate that. We're getting new boards, all kinds of new stuff, but it does take a lot of effort in a market such as Houston to keep a radio station afloat, an FM radio station, the Mighty 90, 100,000 watts of power, been here for 52 years. That's an exciting kind of undergroundish thing. And I think if you're down with that, wherever you are, if you got something to throw down, then, KPFT is the spot to toss a little love this way. I know there's a phone number they can call, Derrick, and I don't have it ready, but I'd like to make sure that all our supporters are aware of that number. And, we see some of these faces again and again. We definitely appreciate what the comments we get, the call-ins we get, the guests we have. And if you appreciate this too, and you think that a show like ours needs to be on FM radio, if you think advancing culture like what we're talking about needs to be on FM radio in the third largest city to fourth largest city in this empire, broadcasting from Galveston Bay to Lake Houston is a necessary thing in this struggle of hearts and minds and free speech. We're on a commercial-free FM station. That's a big deal nowadays. There's very few of those left, and here we are in Houston. And we're working for it. We've been working for it for a decade, and we're working for it because we think the dialogue's important. And mostly we're thankful to KPFT, and that's why we want to do our part to support KPFT. We don't get the money. We get the ability to broadcast on FM radio, share music from our favorite stuff, talk about your quotes, talk about the issues that we see that you as a listener seem to think are important as well, at least based on the feedback we get in the chats and in the calls. So, I don't want to go on. This isn't a pledge drive right now, but it's always a pledge drive. It costs a lot of money to keep even our hour on, more than you might think. And so if you can spare, $1, if you can spare $5, it's easy to make your contribution in the name of Free Thinker Radio, please. Then you help them recognize the value we're bringing as a show, or in the name of Live Free, Think Free. You recognize they can recognize the value that we are bringing to them. I hope you recognize the value we're bringing, because there is some sacrifice in it. I don't think much about it because we like doing it. We like to talk about it, but we have to hurry home. We have to put the stories together. I'm not only talking about this so in case you didn't think there was some work involved for your whatever love gift you give the station. That's all I got to say, because I love the station.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, guys, that as Micah said, we've been doing this show, Live Free, Think Free, formerly known as Free Thinker Radio, since 2011, broadcasting on 90.1 KPFT in Houston, Galveston, the fourth largest, 4 million plus people metroplex in the United States. And we consider it to be, an honor, and we're really thankful, as Micah said, commercial-free, corporate-free community radio, Houston's longest community radio station that's always trying to keep up, always needing to fundraise. And so August 3rd begins a new fundraiser. It's not happening this week, as Micah said, but you can always visit kpft.org. And the number that we have on the screen, it's 713-526-5738, 713-526-5738. You can call them and say, hey, I'd like to make a $5, whatever dollar, any amount, any support, or a gift even, just to the station, some equipment that might help them out. Anything, as long as you let them know it's happening in the name of Live Free, Think Free, and you tell them, I want that show to stay on the air. Because let's be real about it. There's been times where people have maybe preferred that our show and our topics weren't allowed on a place like KPFT and weren't allowed on the radio. So we're thankful for it. Do we have a guest ready, Micah?
Yeah, that was well said, Derrick, and I definitely appreciate you adding that to this. Yeah, we have a guest. We have Ricky D of probably one of the strongest bands in the Gulf Coast area, Ganesha. They perform everywhere from White Oak to maybe your party. I don't know, but they do perform quite often. They open for national acts quite often. They are a contender, and they've got an album in the can, and they've got a show coming up. If you're listening on FM, it's coming up tonight at the end. So let's get in and talk to Ricky. He's been a longtime supporter of the show as well, as far as I understand. What's up, Ricky?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Doing well, man. Doing well. So
what's up, brother?
We know we're here to talk about this show coming up Friday, but we're also here to talk about some other things. And so why don't we just open up with tell us who you are and what you think about the show and what you think maybe about the audience and what you think about KPFT.
Okay. My name's Ricky and I play guitar and sing for Ganesha, and we're really excited about the show tomorrow. We're playing with the Hates, and we've been meaning to play with them for a while. So when we got hit up by the guys in Killer Hearts, we jumped on it right away. And the show is going to be fantastic. I think the crowds in Houston right now are really energized, probably from being locked up for so long. And it's just it just feels like a new, maybe sort of Renaissance time right now.
I think that's important. I've heard that there's a new energy. I've seen it at some shows where you might not expect so many people. There's been quite a lot of people. People have been energized. I think it's interesting that you tie it to the lockdowns and the forced inhibition that we had during that time. So I appreciate that. What do you think about stations like KPFT? I mean, I know you're not going to come on and bash KPFT, but what do you think about them reaching people? And what do you think about the role of shows like ours?
Well, I think it's important in the fact that it's independent and you get an actual opinion or representation rather than something scripted, or they're just putting a paper in front of somebody with a certain message, or I don't want to use the word agenda too much, but something of the sort.
Totally, I appreciate that.
Someone else's ideas from a higher up who is maybe impersonal or out of phase or out of touch with what's really going on.
Yeah, all that makes sense for sure. I think the show's going to be exciting. I hear you got new shirts.
Yeah, we're actually at the shop right now, getting them ready right before the show. So they're going to still be warm on the
Nice. So, one of the things that's probably worth talking a little bit about is how important outlets are for, local musicians such as yourself, regional musicians such as yourself. How important are these outlets, and how many of them are there? I mean, outlets that play the music, cable shows, stuff like that. I mean, I'm starting to think, I have access through a lot of apps, right? My YouTube feeds me all kinds of stuff that's like what I listen to. So I do discover new music in this era that way. I'm looking at how do people discover the new music, but also I'm looking at how valuable is radio play? How valuable is how often, how can you get in there and do this? Do people discover music? Are other bands interested in getting their play on radio still? I mean, is it a valuable commodity to you as a musician?
I would say so, simply because FM is very, the broadcast is large, and maybe you're reaching a different audience than you would, let's say, on Spotify or something of the sort, because that has its own pool of people, But FM, I don't know, it's like it's a large broadcast. I think it's important to still try and keep that alive, because you might be able to pull in other people that maybe wouldn't have access to, what's going on with that.
Yeah, I think the point that I value the most that you just made there is it might be something the people who hear us there might be outside of our normal, the people who show up at the shows, the people in our reach. Normally, they're new people, like
Everyone's on the commute right now. It's like this time everyone's either on the road or something of the sort, or getting off of work. It's Friday, and maybe they're looking for something to do. So now they know to go to the end.
Tell me about the end. Tell me about the end. I haven't made it out there yet. Tell me about the end.
It's a new venue. I believe it's ran by Joey Molina and his wife. And when I talked with him about it, he was like saying that he wanted to open a venue by musicians for musicians, and kind of have that sort of ethos with it. And I haven't made it there myself, but I've been keeping up, and tonight will be the first night, so that's really exciting. The pictures and videos that I've seen has just been really like enticing, and it's great to see so many people gather for music again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I agree with you entirely. Hey, you want to talk a few moments about the album that y'all are going to drop probably in the next 6 months or so? And I know there's been some revision and about the work that it takes to create an album of quality, an album that you can stand behind and feel. You've already released 2 albums. One was a live album, one was a studio album. So this will be your second full studio album. I'd like you to, we have other musicians that watch this show. They want to know about what's going on. They learn, maybe you could talk from that level of what you've done and what you've learned in this process and what we have to look forward to in what's it called, reflections, correct?
Right. Okay, so we began the album, I think shortly before the pandemic, or I'm thinking around that time, and in the process of it, we've gone in and maybe re-recorded some songs, or maybe we were in a different headspace, so we wanted to give it a shot, and we kept listening to it, and we didn't want to settle. We didn't want to settle with this record because it meant so much to us and to me personally, writing the songs and experiencing life the way that I did at that in the process of writing them, or being inspired and influenced and stuff. So I was like, man, I'm not going to settle. So no matter what it takes to get it right, we're going to get it right, because once it's out there, I mean, it's out the gate and the bull's running. So
I think that's really important, because it seems like there's always eagerness to get our work out there, as writers and just artists. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but please continue.
Yeah. And so I guess we wanted to make sure the recording process was pretty similar to the way that we have practice. Like we use the same amps and even the same vocal PA. So really when you're listening to it, you kind of get the authentic feeling that you're there with us, and it's not too polished, it's not too anything. We're trying to keep it raw and real as much as possible.
For sure. And I know that ahead of the album's release, you've just dropped a single, Imaginary Person. Hoping we can jump into that tonight. I know you sent us the song over. We played Ganesha more than a couple of times. You've been a guest before. I think we can get to one version, if not the other. We're hoping we can play the video version. If not, we do have the music alone. You want to talk about that song a little bit, because it's the latest thing, and I've heard more than a couple of people tell me it's their favorite song.
Yeah. We've had people begin singing it at the shows and everything, and then it's really interesting to look out into the crowd and notice that someone's singing along to a tune. It's it's great to play catch with that. And so the song was originally written by artist Ty Segall, who's been a huge influence here recently for me and the guys. And it was just a song that I couldn't get out of my head. So one day I practiced. I was like, hey guys, I got this tune that I think we should learn and put our own twist on it, our own spin. And so we did, and all the guys just learned the parts, and right away we were like, okay, we're going to record this and just get it out. And it's been a great process hearing it back. People are like, we didn't even know it's a cover. We never heard the song, and we like the original, but we really like what you're doing too. We like your twist. So that means a lot, because the artist that Ty Segall is, I think I respect them a lot. So to have somebody say that they really enjoy our version, like we did it justice, then that's just really cool.
Definitely appreciate that. I like the song myself, and I look forward to hearing it. And glad to be able to share it on the FM, especially with those that
excited.
So
yeah,
I guess
we'll wrap it up. It's dropped on Visionary Noise Records. Check them out. They do great. They do great work.
Well, definitely looking forward to the show at the end Friday night. That's tonight. If you're listening on the FM, for sure. You want to tell anybody else? You told us the Hates are on it, Killer Hearts are on it, and who else?
666 from LA.
All right, out of town bands, best in Houston, and all kinds of stuff. So that's good. All right,
yeah, we have fresh new shirts, fresh off the press. They'll still be warm for you. So come out.
All that sounds good. Anything else you want to leave us with, or is that it?
That'll be it. And stay tuned for the album. And we'll see you at the next show tonight.
No doubt, man. It's good hanging with you, Rick. You have a good one.
You too.
Thanks.
That sounds cool. A lot going on there. It's good to see Ricky, as you said, an old friend of the show who's still doing it, still continuing. Shout out to Ricky and the whole band and everybody. And I haven't got to check out the end yet either, but I am friends with John. I think that he's, like you said, Joey Molina and another fellow John from Grimace Records are the people running the end venue, and I'm going to be working on them for the release of my music in the future. So it's cool to see just things growing out there. But we got a lot to cover tonight, guys. You're listening to Live Free, Think Free. We do this every Friday. Been broadcasting since summer 2011, and we do so on the Conscious Resistance Network. We're live on Odyssey, on Rockfin, on DLive, and on YouTube and Facebook, and of course on 90.1 KPFT Houston. You can visit kpft.org and make an investment in Houston's only community radio station. And even if you don't live in Houston and you're like, well, why should I support some station in a place I don't live? Well, you do so knowing that when you get to tune in and listen for free on the internet, that by throwing a little money to the station, you're helping make sure that people who are driving around the city are going to hear these conversations and are going to hear these ideas. And we really do try to cover things that aren't typically covered in the mainstream media. And you might not think about it, but the radio is mainstream media to a large degree. And so it's like we kind of cracked in a little bit. Don't tell anybody, but we're sort of in the door, and we're trying to reach as many people as possible. So if you want to support us by supporting KPFT, we appreciate that. Micah, you ready to jump into these Houston stories?
Yeah, no doubt. I'm looking forward to the end. I'll just say this real quick because I don't know how many shows I've gone to. I've been at Trip 6 and I'm ready to go somewhere else. I mean, they're all right.
It seems like a cool venue.
Yeah. Let's get into this stuff. There's, as usual, stuff's going on in Houston. Let's get into this one. Yeah, it turns out that a deputy kills this unarmed black man after alleged shoplifting from Houston Dollar General. And if you want to move down further in this, what it tells us is that a man supposedly grabbed some items, ran out of the Dollar General, ran into the lady. She says he hit her or something like that. This happened. Other people called the police as well. But it turns out when they got him, they did some really strange things. They tased him. They were holding his neck, and he did grab the taser, they're saying. And I guess this is in the story as well. But he didn't point it at the officer. He dropped it immediately. It was on the ground as the officer was holding him by the neck, and the officer shoots him. Yep, that's what happened. So, yeah, it turns out that the family has alleged police brutality. Imagine that. And misuse of force. So yeah, we'll see. We'll keep following this. It was a 47-year-old gentleman. They think that law enforcement is only giving, a fraction of the story here. And I don't know where we heard this before, but these things, they need to be reported. So we're getting into it. And there's some questions about the body cam footage. There's some blackout spots. The officer hit Brooks several times, and I guess the main thing that they can say is, oh, he was running away. Well, once you're running away, you got to be hit, tased, shot. I don't know. What do you think, Derrick?
I just want to say that, well, there's one thing as well to note there that the family is calling on Texas Rangers and the Department of Justice to investigate the shooting as well. So that's, we'll see where that goes. But overall, one thing I will say, Micah, without getting sucked too much in this because we got more to cover, but I think it's interesting when you have stuff like this happening, like you said, I mean, it's not anything we haven't seen. police shootings. Okay, people, I'm sure there's somebody out there who would say, well, he shouldn't have been shoplifting. And then definitely people who would say, well, he shouldn't have grabbed the taser, right? But it feels like if the cops aren't aiming for de-escalation, then, people will inevitably be killed. And unfortunately, the cops seem to get away with it. But what I was going to say is it's interesting because I've noticed in the mainstream last, few days, they've been reporting that Donald Trump gave his first speech in Washington, D.C. since the January 6th thing a couple of years ago, right? And I listened to a little bit of it, and I even thought about doing a report. I guess we're mentioning it here, but guess what? Trump being an authoritarian, saying we need the cops to be more aggressive, saying that we need to go into certain states. If the governors won't do what we need them to do, we need to send in National Guard and take over to protect people's rights, saying that we need to put the death penalty for drug dealers. And it's like, so you've got these kind of things happening, and you got people out there who still think we should be giving cops like unlimited powers. Like, and that's basically what Trump was saying. So if anybody needed a reminder that he's an authoritarian, I mean, there you go. But yeah. So I know we got a couple other ones. It seems like there's a couple of different lawsuits. I know you had one. I got one. You want to start with this Fifth Ward pollution situation that's been kind of developing?
Yeah, for sure. We did cover some of this in the past, but it turns out that and I guess we've talked about the issue numerous times, and we've read articles about the issue, and we've followed some of the activism on the issue. But only recently did we start hearing that the city was getting into trying to do something with the legal system about this. And what that is Houston and Harris County leaders have said they're going to sue Union Pacific Railroad for what they say is the company's role in creosote contamination in Fifth Ward. The announcement of the lawsuit, which was not yet filed, comes about 2 weeks after testing found traces of this chemical in the soil near Union Pacific Rail Yard. Officials say they foresee a quicker resolution with the threat of a lawsuit under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, a federal act acted in 1976 that regulates hazardous waste disposal. One thing got to ask yourself, and that maybe I'm just older or something, 1976 wasn't that long ago. I don't know how long this stuff stays in the ground, but nonetheless, if UP will not make truly meaningful changes to address the pollution with our lawsuits by the city, county, and community, we will seek justice at the courthouse, Mayor Turner said. The Union Pacific Railroad near the historically Black and Hispanic community is the site of former industrial facility, hear this, former, where wooden railroad ties were treated with chemical called creosote, a likely human carcinogen. Phone poles have been treated with this. There's all kinds of things that are treated with this. I'm just mentioning that. The parts they were
crazy. This has been going on in Houston for a number of years. I mean, I remember when there was, I think U of H or some study came out and was like, hey, we have cancer clusters in this part of Houston. And, it made the news for a week or two, and some people talked about it. Obviously, some people continued to stay on it, but it's good to see. I'm not really supportive of the mayor, but if this is something that will maybe lead to a solution for those people, then maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah, they also found dioxin in the soil, in addition. And a number of community activists and activists have been involved in this. People have been getting cancer, the inordinate numbers of cancer cells, clusters, stuff like that. So, yeah, you're right. If resolution can be found, then that's probably a good thing. But I'd like to ask you, Derrick, because this is one of the things I'm starting to wonder. It's been a recurring thing we're seeing in Houston where, the state's going after doing things. They're doing this. They're doing, what's that one? The SAFE program with where do you go? How far do you go?
The Houston One Safe thing. Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's what I'm saying. I don't really want to be in favor of like the government going after people and things of that sort. But I mean, something needs to change in that area where there's clearly like they're detecting cancer. The government, the state isn't doing anything in the sense of the local government. I guess this is their attempt to try to say, hey, we're making an effort. But if you don't mind, I want to segue because to your point, like you said, like how far are they going to go? Well, this next story is another lawsuit going on, but kind of in the reverse. City of Houston, this is just earlier this past week, City of Houston responds to surprise and unwarranted announcement about an investigation by the Department of Justice that's investigating the City of Houston. And Mayor Sylvester Turner said the following: from day one, the City of Houston under my administration has prioritized the needs of communities of color that are historically under-resourced and underserved. My Complete Communities initiative works to limit blah, blah, blah. He's just trying to trump up all the things he's doing. And he says, this morning, the city of Houston was stunned and disappointed to learn about the investigation into illegal dumping by third parties launched by the U.S. Department of Justice. Despite the DOJ's pronouncements, my office received no advance notice. This investigation is absurd, baseless, and without merit. City of Houston prioritizes and uses several mechanisms to combat illegal dumping by third parties, a practice that we agree disproportionately plagues Black and brown communities. And he goes on to say, like, they've spent millions of dollars trying to address this. They've doubled this, And so he says the DOJ investigation is a slap in the face to the city and the many people who are diligently working to address illegal dumping and prevent environmental justice. So, the story you're talking about is related to the cancer clusters, as they mentioned here, Fifth Ward, Kashmir Gardens, trying to help people there. He's mentioned, he's like, where cancer-causing creosote from UP Railroad has created health concerns, yet the DOJ has remained silent. So he's trying to say, like, hey, we're fighting in these different ways, and now apparently the DOJ is investigating the city in relation to illegal dumping and its effect on the environment. So there's a lot going on in the city as far as environmental toxicity and lawsuits and investigations. And again, if it leads to people getting less cancer, then generally I'm supportive. But it's just interesting to see all that. Had you seen that one?
I had seen another article, not this one, but what they called like racial-based pollution. And it was basically this in a nutshell, about, they did argue, the article argued that, disproportionate numbers of dumping occurred in Black and brown communities. But yeah, and of course, like in the other article, I don't want to defend the railroad necessarily. I'm just curious, I think that it seems that if any branch of government seems to sometimes help us, it might be the judicial system. I'm not sure. You know what I mean? I'm just not sure what to think about that. It's hard because, in one breath we're saying, look, if the railroad put this poison in the ground that gave people cancer, most people think the railroad should do something about it. But then also most people don't feel that the railroad will. Most people don't believe that the railroad will do anything about it. So then, the force of the gun and government comes in and straightens it out and has another, laurel, another feather in its hat of how it saved the community. And you got to ask yourself, how do we differentiate? It's a question of the proper role of government, right? I mean, really, that's what it boils down to. So, there may be a reactionary streak to, always want the government to solve problems. There may be a reactionary streak to always resist the government solving problems. But the fact of the matter is, if the problem's being solved, I think as human beings, we can be happy about that. And since the money's already been taken and those government employees already have jobs, then if they're at least going about good work, we can be glad of that. So
it's the least worst thing they can do, right?
Right.
Guys, you're listening to Live Free, Think Free. We do this every week, and we just got a couple more Houston stories. I'm about to talk about one I think is a little an update on this whole misinformation thing. We're going to talk in a second. In case you guys hadn't heard, monkeypox had been declared a global health emergency, and it's no mistake that the Houston city leaders are calling for monkeypox vaccines. And in just a few minutes, we're going to play
that image.
Yeah, you see that? That fear. Look at that. Yeah. So in just a couple minutes, we're going to follow this up because we're talking to this next story about COVID misinformation. A local Houston doctor that was fired for that, now filing a lawsuit. Lots of lawsuits going on. And then we're talking about, well, now we're being told it's monkeypox health emergency, and the Houston area leaders are calling for monkeypox vaccines. And as some of us who are still trying to figure out how the heck did the last 2 years happen, and calls for lockdowns that don't work and that hurt people, and masking of kids and shutting down schools even though kids weren't at risk, like, how did this happen? We're going to play an interview in just a few minutes with Professor Mattias Desmet of Ghent University in Belgium. He's a professor of clinical psychology and an author of this new book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, and he's been talking about his theory of mass formation. So we're going to play a clip on that in a few minutes. But before we do that, we're going to play some music in just a moment. But I want to mention this story. It's kind of an update because I know we covered it before, Micah. You remember when COVID stuff was going on, Methodist Hospital was the first hospital in Houston to announce that they were going to fire nurses that didn't comply with the mandates. Well, they also were making the news because a doctor who was affiliated with them, Dr. Mary Bowden, who is a ear, nose, and throat doctor based in River Oaks in the Houston area, she was I think let go or fired, and Mark Boom, the CEO of the hospital, had kind of said some statements against her. Well, now she is filing a $25 million defamation lawsuit against Methodist Hospital. She says for spreading false information about her and accusing her of spreading misinformation. And I mean, it's interesting. I'm pulling this from the Houston Public Media article. Her lawsuit says, quote, Methodist and Boom retaliated against Dr. Bowden in an unprecedented manner. Without notice, they published false and defamatory statements to the press and on social media, affording no due process, acting contrary to and with reckless disregard for both the letter and spirit of Methodist bylaws. And the $25 million lawsuit was filed in Harris County District Court. And she says, quote, I want to clear my name and hold them accountable. Every person has a right to an unimpaired reputation. Thanks to Methodist, half the world thinks that I'm crazy and dangerous. And the thing is, it's funny how they say this, that she was accused of suggesting, based on research she was doing, showing that the vaccines weren't working. And I think by now that's pretty accurate, that people who are vaccinated 3-4 times, including the president of the United States, are still getting whatever they say it is, or they're testing positive at least, right? For whatever that's worth. So yeah, just to kind of let you know, we've talked about this in other areas, that even if you feel like the COVID insanity is over, there's still people dealing with the repercussions. People who lost their jobs, people who were defamed, people who, couldn't travel, maybe were abused, people who died in the hospital for different treatments. And this is one doctor who's trying to file a lawsuit to at least see if she can get any recourse for that. So
I hope that if they don't give her the money, that she's at least able to get her thoughts and ideas out in the media or something by through the lawsuit. But I kind of hospitals need all the money they can get, right? They make tons of money in the medical industrial complex. They always need more. But I kind of do hope she wins. Is that wrong to say?
I'm feeling the same. I hope she wins too as well. So we're going to talk now about monkeypox, Micah. And literally, as we're having this conversation, I just got like a ding on one of my channels, and it was like, "Oh, what's that update from the San Francisco Chronicle?" And I'm putting it on screen right now. San Francisco declares state of emergency because of monkeypox. And again, nobody's died from monkeypox, and apparently it's very rare for anybody to die. San Francisco declares state of emergency over monkeypox. They got signs of people, monkeypox vaccine access now. And I'm sorry, but I just can't really take this seriously. I got the Houston area leaders calling for more monkeypox vaccine doses amid nationwide shortage. Meanwhile, I definitely remember just a couple of months ago, I didn't have time to pull up the clip, Micah, but I mean, I know you remember the episode a couple months ago when I was talking about the monkeypox simulation, and I was like, I don't know what this means, but I hope we're not ending up in a situation in a couple months where they start telling us, here it is, the world is whatever. But I'm seeing all the signs. It's all in the news. The World Health Organization talking about it. Peter Hotez is talking about vaccines. Mayor Turner says, what we learned from COVID is when the demand is high and supply is limited, people are very, very frustrated. Now with monkeypox, with all the attention that's been brought to it, the demand is very high. They're claiming that there's just this massive demand in Houston all of a sudden. And if there is, maybe there really is, I would say it's because of the fear that they drove in people based on the previous thing, to the point that now you got a place like San Francisco, which, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things going on over there, declaring a state of emergency. 261 people have, they said, confirmed or probable monkeypox infections. And again, they're using a PCR test to determine this. So I don't know how much we can trust this, but yeah. And this is like, I wanted to use this after we hear from you, Micah, like to segue to Mattias Desmet's talk on mass formation, because it's like, wow, I feel like we're still trying to figure out and recover from the previous thing and dissect and hold people accountable and make sure the truth gets out. And then now they're like, oh, here's the next thing.
Feel like a boxer just got like kind of beat up in round one, kind of coming into round two. No, I'm serious. I think a lot of people are just already down for the count anyway. Like
I agree.
Like you can't think about this stuff or something. No, this is unparalleled. You don't know what's real. All the media channels will be blathering on about it. Everybody, because safety is such an important thing. Just like it just reminds me of terrorism. Be afraid; it's going to happen to you.
This is the biosecurity terror state now. Not just the terrorists out there, but the terrorists in the pathogens, the viruses. It could be anywhere. It could be everyone. Right. Well,
fear is big business.
Fear is big business, guys. Let's take a music break here on Live Free, Think Free. I did get that song pulled up. What is this song from Ganesha called?
This song is Imaginary Person. It's a new song out by Ganesha, a new single. And so, yeah, I'm glad we can share it. I enjoy it. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
All right, well, let's play this song. This is Imaginary Person. I have the one that you sent me recently, Micah, and I have an older version we had before. Are these the same thing?
The new one's a video.
Okay, video. All right, let's play the video then. And this is Ganesha, Imaginary Person. When we come back, we'll play a short clip of my interview with Professor Mattias Desmet. Stay tuned. You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston.
All right. They're going to be playing Friday night at the end. Go see them.
That was awesome. Yeah, check it out. Ganesha, Imaginary Person, new album coming out soon. Happy we could debut that here on Live Free, Think Free. I was going to add, Micah, we were just talking about monkeypox just a moment ago. Check this out. I'm over on the Twitter account of Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization. And just a couple of days ago, he said, as we have seen with COVID-19, misinformation and disinformation can rapidly spread online. The WHO calls on social media platforms, tech companies, and news organizations to work with us to prevent and counter harmful information and stigma around monkeypox. So they're already calling for using the strength of big tech to take down things that they don't like if people are out there saying the wrong things, talking about those wrong things related to monkeypox. So we'll see where that goes. But as I was mentioning, I've got this interview. I did a long-form interview with Professor Mattias Desmet. I from Belgium, and he's first started making the rounds because he's been doing some writing in recent months. And Dr. Robert Malone talked about his theory of mass formation on Joe Rogan's show, and that made it kind of get out there in front of a lot of people and go a little viral. People were curious about it. Well, he's recently published his book with Chelsea Green. It's a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And this is just a 9-minute clip of that interview that you can find at theconsciousresistance.com. And so the section we're about to play is just Professor Desmet explaining what his theory of mass formation is. And I think this is important because as we're talking about this shift into now monkeypox, we have to try to figure out like what the heck has happened over the last 2 years. And so this is him describing that. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Again, this is Professor Mattias Desmet talking about his theory of mass formation.
Well, mass formation just refers literally to the formation of a mass which is a specific kind of group. So mass formation is a specific kind of group formation, a group formation which has a very remarkable impact at the level of the psychological and the mental functioning of individuals, who are in the grip of this kind of group formation. For instance, individuals who are in the grip of mass formation typically tend to become radically incapable to take a critical distance of what they believe in, and this goes quite far. For instance, in 1979, during the Iran Revolution, the revolution in Iran, there was this, which was like a large-scale process of mass formation in Iran. People started to believe that the portrait, the photo of the Ayatollah, whom they considered to be their leader, the leader of the mass, was printed on the surface of the moon. And when there was a full moon at the sky, people typically stood in the streets, pointing at the moon, showing each other where they could see the portrait of the Ayatollah on the surface of the moon. So that's one example of how the strange blindness that can emerge in individuals who are in the grip of a process of mass formation. So the people in the mass formation can really start to believe the most absurd and the most strange ideas or thoughts. And a second very important characteristic is that individuals who are in the grip of mass formation typically become willing to radically sacrifice everything that was important to them before the mass formation started. So it is as if people in the mass formation lose every awareness of their own individual egoistic interests to a very extreme extent. A third characteristic is that people who are in the grip of mass formation typically become radically intolerant for dissonant voices. They become intolerant for everyone who speaks out against what the masses believe in. This can go quite far. In the end, masses typically start to destroy. First, they start to stigmatize. They very often give signs to the people who don't want to go along with them. And in the end, they tend to destroy or to commit cruelties towards the people who do not go along with them. And what is even more characteristic, they do so as if it is their ethical duty to do so. And they do so also, they commit these cruelties also towards the people whom they used to love very much before the mass formation started. To give you only one example, I will refer to the revolution in Iran in 1978, 1979. Again, I talked with this woman who lived in Iran during the revolution. Her name is Shoreh Feshtali. You can, the conversation I'm talking about is still available on the internet. Well, this woman described me how she had seen with her own eyes how a mother reported her son to the state, how she hung the rope around his neck when her son was on the scaffold. And when he was hung, she claimed to be a heroine for what she did. That's the typical end stage of a process of mass formation. And that shows how extremely important it is to understand the mechanism of mass formation. Because if you understand it, you can avoid that the process goes to the last stage where the masses typically start to commit cruelties. So how does it work, this process of mass formation? A mass formation is a kind of group formation, a specific group dynamic that emerges under very specific conditions. And the first and most crucial of these conditions is that many people in a society have to feel disconnected. They have to feel disconnected from their natural and their social environment. And that was definitely the case in the corona crisis. Just before the crisis started, or in the years before the crisis started, the number of lonely people peaked. Worldwide, there were over 30% of the people who reported not to have one meaningful relationship. And that's also very interesting. This number of people was clearly correlated to the level of industrialization and the level of technology use in a country. The higher the level of industrialization, the more technology use, the more people feel disconnected and lonely. For instance, in the United Kingdom, Theresa May appointed a minister of loneliness because she acknowledged how many people felt lonely in her country. And in the United States, the US Surgeon General reported that there was a loneliness epidemic in the States. So that shows this loneliness of disconnectedness was very present in society just before the corona crisis started. And then from there on, as soon as many people feel lonely and disconnected, it's like a cascade of effects, of psychological effects, that leads to the mass formation. So once people feel disconnected and lonely, they typically will start to experience a lack of meaning making in life. Lack of meaning making, which was also very clear. Over 60% of the people worldwide before the corona crisis reported that they considered their job to be a so-called bullshit job, which means a job which they didn't know of what the meaning or the purpose of it was. And after that, once people feel disconnected and feel confronted with experiences of lack of meaning making, a very typical effect will happen at the level of their affective emotional functioning. Namely, they will be confronted with so-called freely floating anxiety, frustration, and aggression. All their negative feelings will disconnect from mental representations, and people will start to feel anxious, frustrated, aggressive, without knowing what they feel anxious, frustrated, and aggressive for. And this is a very aversive mental state. When you feel anxious and you don't know what you feel anxious for, you feel completely out of control. And when you feel frustration and aggression and you don't know what you feel frustrated and aggressive for, you cannot direct your aggression at something outside of you. And it is as if all the aggression and frustration heaps up in yourself. It remains in yourself. And the level of tension in the end becomes unbearable. And when people are in this condition, something very typical might happen. If under these conditions, a narrative is disseminated through the mass media, indicating an object of anxiety, and at the same time providing a strategy to deal with that object of anxiety, for instance, the lockdowns to deal with a virus, or QR codes to deal with people who are not vaccinated, and so on. So when such a narrative is distributed, all this free-floating anxiety might suddenly connect to the object of anxiety, and there might be a huge willingness to participate in a strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, even if the strategy, in many respects, is absurd and self-destructive. Just because, by participating in a strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, people realize, like a first important psychological advantage, They can connect their anxiety now to one object, and they can control that object mentally by participating in a strategy to deal with the object of anxiety. And at the same time, they also have an object to direct all their frustration and aggression on.
All right, welcome back to Live Free, Think Free. That was my interview with Professor Mattias Desmet of Ghent University in Belgium, and he was discussing his theory of mass formation and his book that has been released recently called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. If you want to see that full interview, which is over an hour long, we go pretty deep with it. You can check it out at theconsciousresistance.com. But what do you think, Micah, about some of the things he was saying? Like, you know, the kind of the loneliness precipitating something like this, and then people losing like meaning in their lives, and then something comes along and it's like, hey, here, direct your frustration at this.
Well, you know, I think two things to begin with. I mean, we don't have a lot of time. One thing I think is I'd like to, you know, read something he's put together because he seems to be fairly persuasive. He's got a lot of ground with his theories. I think that we need to look at them, you know, both ways and look at examples that prove and look at examples that perhaps disprove it. And what do I mean by it? I don't mean the general theory, but I mean the causal mechanism within his theory. Okay. So people get this loneliness thing is what he's saying. And, you know, so that's like a variable. That's something he's saying, you know, is sort of like the beginning step, right? What causes that? You know, what in his theory, that's what I'm saying. I like to read because I'm sure he has the answer to this one. I'd like to know what that answer is, but further with this, besides that, is what about other things? You know, what about, you know, the general idea, the, you know, common sense idea that the poor, destitute German people after World War I couldn't afford anything in a hyperinflation nation and were starving and hurt and defeated and forced to pay reparations. And so they had not loneliness, but despair, you know, all of a sudden you're burning your money because burning it is better than buying firewood. You know, I mean, that was the reality for, you know, and it was a Western nation. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they had bougie stuff beforehand. And I think, Mike, so I wanted to bring up that I think there could be more than one causal mechanism, such as loneliness. But
for sure, I don't think he tries to say that it's only loneliness, but he describes as like that's one condition or feeling that people might experience. But he was really kind of pointing it to, at least from what I took from my conversation and I've read most of the book so far, but he talks about lack of meaning making. But he also, I don't know if you caught this point.
I think
too,
that's
he also
mentioned the causal mechanism. I think that's
exactly like it's not just like loneliness, but like you said, despair. People like lose a sense of meaning for their life, and like you said, people feel like they're working BS jobs that have no meaning. And then, you know, he was kind of giving examples of reports of like, oh, the UK and the US had to appoint Ministry of Loneliness or something like that. But I think it was also important that he said in his assessment, again, like it's still a theory, right? It's not like this is the one thing that maybe explains everything, and maybe explains some situations but not others. He talks about like in his book, he really sort of attacks not science, but what maybe some of us might refer to as scientism, or he refers to it as the mechanistic worldview, and how, you know, his view isn't like, you know, super spiritual or anything like that, but he does say that people need to pursue not necessarily religion or spirituality, whatever it is that's going to help them find meaning in their lives so that they can move past this like lack of meaning making, which then he thinks can be preyed upon, whether in a conscious conspiratorial type of way, like people planning like, hey, let's prey upon the people's loneliness and weakness, or simply something that develops because people start looking for meaning. But I thought it was interesting. He said that it was like mostly in his research concentrated in highly industrialized societies. Like he sees these kind of things happen, or the loneliness and the despair and the lack of meaning making.
Well, you know, it's kind of cumulative. You look at the news, right? You look at the news, people do feel a disconnect when we joke about Gotham, right? You know, everyone knows there's something awry, something rotten in Denmark, right? I mean, so I think that we need to kind of consider what kind of world we're making with our actions, as well as, our focus on authoritarians and the big E's that are trying to, control us, and the stuff that people fall into, just community, as a communal animal. We need to try to create meaning. We need to try to imbue the world with meaning. And that's one of the things we need to be thankful for artists and musicians for helping to do. They help us to connect with aspects of ourselves that find meaning. I think that we need to actively engage in meaning seeking and meaning making in our lives and with friends and with others. That way we have an active part instead of a reactive part, because he's kind of talking about what we in a bad way might call sheeples or zombies, right? They get so disconnected from their feelings that they're not processing their emotions, right? They have what he called free floating anger, anxiety, and I forget the other one. I tried to write it down though. Three of them, but anxiety, anger, and aggression. And think about what that means. Free floating emotional states that just pop in and out like that. I'm sure we've all got moods that we go into that are harder to explain than emotional reactions are, because we know what made us angry or we know what made us happy. But those moods, but to think of that already sounds scary to me. Free floating states like this, and the person that's willing to get to the point that this is going on has, I believe, bought into a narrative that leads them to a place to believe that there's no way to create meaning in this. A certain defeatism, a certain lack, or the world's gone to hell in a handbasket. Back in the day, you can hear all kinds of different expressions that would lead people into this. And I think what's scary is when they're directed by a Hitler or a Stalin or a Mao or someone that says, monkeypox is the new death, or whatever it might be, weapons of mass destruction, and things you don't know. I think once you start accepting things you don't know, you start having more effects like free floating emotional states. I don't know. That's just me babbling on, and I'm thankful for the opportunity for asking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that insight, and we appreciate everybody who's listening, guys. We're pretty much out of time today. We definitely appreciate all of you supporting. We are going to once more shout out KPFT, 90.1 KPFT, kpft.org. Visit there, make an investment in Houston's only remaining commercial-free, corporate-free community station. Let them know you're doing so in the name of Derrick and Micah and Live Free, Think Free, and that you love our show and you want to keep us on air and make some support for that. But we're going to end with the song from Velveteen Echo. Anything else, Micah?
Yeah, honestly, just, I think we are creating a world, and we need to just try to be, as positive as we can be, whatever that means for you, and just love yourself and love the people around you, and try to transmit something positive and not false, but just genuine positively as much as you can. And maybe we can back down from Armageddon. I don't know.
That'd be nice. Keep it real. Free the people. We'll see you guys next week.